Did you guys know that empathy is oftentimes a sin? In fact, what if empathy is like top 3 sins of the evangelical church in the 21st century? I know, super not PC thing to say, but we need to challenge a lot of what's happening in our country, in our culture, and yes, even in the church. Dr. Joe Rigney is a new friend. I've admired his stuff from afar for a long time, and he wrote a new book called The Sin of Empathy. That's right, The Sin of Empathy, Compassion and Its Counterfeits. Isn't that a great title? You may have heard Ali Bestucky picking up on this as well. The Sin of Empathy. Dr. Joe Rigney is an author. He is a professor and a teacher at New St. Andrews College in Moscow, Idaho. We like the guys up there. They do great work. Dr. Joe Rigney joins the show for the first time today to talk about why empathy is often a sin and how often we're seeing it in our political discourse and in the church, even with like multiple examples just in the last few weeks. Once you see this, you're not going to be able to unsee it. And hopefully it'll provide a safeguard for you, your church, and your family in how you deal with this out of control culture in 2025. Buckle up, you're in for a treat. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show. Dr. Rigney, welcome to the show. How has this not happened already?
I don't know, man. I feel like we have friends, and so I guess if we have friends, we should, I guess, be friends. I don't know how that works.
That's right. I love it, man. You know what? I just put something together in my mind as we were getting ready here, and it's Live Like a Narnian.
Yeah,
dude, I have that book, and I read it years ago. I just realized that's you.
That's totally me. Yeah. That's totally me. No, yeah, that was actually my first book and probably the most fun book I've ever written. Every other book's been hard. There's those parts in the writing process where you're like, what am I doing? Why this is going to be terrible. That one was just fun from first to last. It took like a couple of weeks. Like I just pounded it out. It was great. Yeah, it's so good. I came across this really cool Chesterton quote the other day because I'm always reading little things of Chesterton. He said, "Fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey. What fairy tales give the child is his first clear idea of the possible defeat of bogey. Yeah. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon." Yeah. And what I guess what a lot of Christians don't realize right now, Dr. Rigney, is that the dragon can sometimes wear the skin suit of Christendom. Yes.
That's the problem, isn't it, right now?
Yes.
And that's a lot of what you're honing in on and warning about. It might even like use some of the same language as that Christ figure, but it's all screwed up now. You wrote a new book, you've been talking about this for a while, actually. Mm-hmm. It's called The Sin of Empathy, which is like such a great way to trigger David Frenchy Christians, and also drive book sales. Why would you say empathy is a sin, Dr. Rigney? I'm pretty sure that that's a biblical virtue.
Because I want to make everybody mad. No, because of what you said. Because the devil loves to hide destruction and gross things inside good terms. That's the devil's fundamental play is to hijack good things, to twist good things, and so the modern quote unquote virtue of empathy frequently, not always, I know that it can be used fine, but frequently is a twisted and corrupt form of compassion that is very destructive and that hijacks and steers and derails families and churches and nations. And so the part of the reason for the provocative title is to arrest attention, to provoke some thought. Because for most people, it's inconceivable that empathy could ever be a bad thing. It's like being against puppies and kittens. And who could be against puppies and kittens? And it's like, well, I could because it could be really bad.
Yeah. So I can think of several examples off the top of my head, Dr. Joe, of how this manifests. Okay. But this is your show, as they say. Any thoughts recently, especially maybe in the last 6 to 8 weeks under the new governance of the mean tweeting orange man? That illustrates this, because I think a lot of Christians who might watch this or check out your book, again, like you said, might struggle with that. Give us some examples. Let's do 5 of them. I don't care. In recent memory of what you mean.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, I have been talking about this for years, since 2017, 2018. I've been teaching on it for over a decade. And I thought by the time the book was coming out, I wrote another book last year that came out, Leadership and Emotional Sabotage, which is effectively the antidote to this book. I kind of got them maybe out of order. Think of this as a prequel.
Okay.
But I actually was a little bit worried that maybe people have already figured this stuff out. There's been some other great books that have come out. Ali Beth Stuckey wrote a book called Toxic Empathy, which is excellent. And so I thought maybe we're past this. Maybe we figured it out. And then the present administration seems to have realized that the left frequently uses empathy as a steering wheel for conservatives, and they're not going to take it anymore, right? So I don't really care, Margaret, from J.D. Vance is a great example of him saying, you're trying to steer me and I'm not going to be steered. But then every now and then, all of a sudden in the last couple of weeks, there have been a number of examples, like you said, where you go, oh, there's some people who still haven't gotten it yet. They still have not seen the play that's being run. So it's timely. So I think one of them that I think of a couple of weeks ago, Andy Wood, the pastor at Saddleback Church, apologized to his congregation because on Inauguration Day, he had done a social media post. It's funny how these often come back to social media posts. But posted just celebrating the inauguration of the president, the prayer that Franklin Graham had made, and expressing hopefulness that the present administration will be more Christian friendly and give more room for the church to do its work, and compared to the last one. And it was at some level, like a very innocuous kind of post, right? We don't put our trust in governments, we don't trust in leaders, but they can make our lives easier and let the church do the work of preaching the gospel. So that's all. And it's a picture of President Trump and a prayer for him. And I guess his social media account got lit up, and he lasted about 2 weeks. He was able to hold that line before he finally, and what was interesting is it seemed like, based on his apology, that it was his staff that was the major issue, is that they were not able to handle all of the heat that his post had done. He was creating more work for them, and so he apologized to them. I think that apology went well, so he took it to the congregation. And it's a classic example of he kept the post up, to his credit, but he apologized for all sorts of things that were not sins. I think that's one of the things that this empathetic steering wheel does, is it leads us to exaggerate certain things, minimize other things. And so that he was apologizing for things like, if you're confused because you think that maybe I believe that Trump is the savior and that we were putting our hope in government, and it's like, your post literally said you're not doing that. So why, there's no way anybody's actually confused about this. Nobody's confused by this. But they're acting like they are, and you're appeasing them. You're accommodating them. You're dignifying that sort of insane response because their agitation you find unbearable. Or, more likely, your staff's agitation you find unbearable. So your staff is agitated by these people online. They don't like, people are going to think Saddleback is a MAGA church. People are going to think bad things about us and that we're racist and that we're, homophobic, or we're misogynist, or we're, oh no. And they're agitated. And I think he found his staff's agitation unbearable, and so felt the need to dignify their agitation take it to act like that was a sincere thing. And the ironic thing is, effectively, he was being gaslit.
Wow.
And so he apologizes, and in doing so, I think communicates
from the pulpit.
And what it does is, I think in his mind, and this will be a common thread, I think, in some of these examples we're going to talk about, is his goal was unity. He talks about this in his apology. He says, "I'm hoping that now we can move forward in unity." But I would just say, you just guaranteed you won't have unity. Wow. Because what you've just told your people is that they can get their hands on the pulpit if they just bang loud enough on your door.
Wow.
Right? Like the pastor's door can be opened if you get loud enough. Yep. And so you're going to get more of that. You're going to, anytime you step out of line, people have realized we can get to him if we just get loud enough. And as a result, instead of being focused on the mission, which is what his post had been designed to do, like, hey, there's opportunity before us. Let's preach the gospel. Let's call people to repent of their sins. Let's love our neighbors. Like, let's do the mission of the church. And so that's what he wants to do. These people then said, because you did this, you have to attend to us. You have to do what we say. And now he's going to be spending his time putting out these fires rather than leading his people into that mission that he had wanted to. And there's other things in that clip that I think are striking, that you can sort of see a kind of manipulation and subtle contortion happening. So we keep talking about that, or there's other examples if we want to go there.
Well, I mean, and Dr. Rigney, I mean, this is the same guy, okay, Andy, for people listening, who took over Saddleback Church. Mm-hmm. That's the guy that Rick Warren gave the church to. This is the same guy, bro. You remember who, like, one of his first Sundays, he walks out on the platform dressed up as Woody from Toy Story, with his wife dressed up as Bo Peep.
So I saw
that's the same couple. That's Andy.
Okay. So the other day I didn't realize that, because I saw this picture pop up. I saw this picture. Somebody was talking about something, and showed this picture of like Woody, and I was like, that person looks familiar. Who is that? It was making fun of it clearly, and I was like, I wonder what pastor that is. It was the same guy. Now I get it.
And how funny that his name's Andy.
Yeah,
Andy,
right.
And he dresses okay. And then I remember this clip. He walked out and he goes, "Welcome to Saddleback Church. We're going to launch into a biblical series of examining the gospel in the Toy Story movies." Oh, man. So that's the same guy.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah, well, and I mean, so here's an example, a subtle example from that clip, though. These are the sort of things that when you've studied this sort of stuff and thought, I've thought a lot about this over the last decade, right? These are things that I pay close attention to. In his post, it was a subtle thing like this. In his post, he said, grateful for Franklin Graham's, God honoring prayer. In his apology, he said, what moved me to post this, he's explaining, giving the backstory, was the prayer of Lorenzo Sewell, who was the African-American guy who prayed at Trump's inauguration. Both Franklin Graham and Lorenzo Sewell prayed, and they both prayed great prayers. But in the post, he mentioned Franklin Graham. In the apology, he mentioned the other guy. And you kind of go, why did he do that? And the reason, and then you go, that's interesting. Then he goes on to say, and I was also moved by J.D. Vance up there with his wife Usha and their kids. Their kids were so cute. And he said, and the diversity that they represent. And you go, okay. Yeah. And so there was a couple of these little call outs where effectively what he's doing is trying to communicate to his people, or to the people who were agitated and upset by his post.
But first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. This is the best company, okay, that has pro-family, pro-life values, and is actually putting their money where their mouth is. You've got baby wipes, diapers, and baby shampoos from a company who celebrates the dignity of unborn children and donates diapers when national disasters happen. Donate diapers to pregnancy resource centers. They're an incredible group. They were one of our sponsors at Life or Death Con in Washington, D.C. just recently. Go to everylife.com to get your baby wipes and diapers for those of you having kids and babies, but also tell your kids if they're having kids, and tell the nursery at your church, and tell the pregnancy center that you support in your city. Why would we spend our money with companies that hate us and the unborn? Because every major diaper company supports abortion, financially or rhetorically. spend your money on baby stuff at everylife.com. Promo code Seth10, Seth10, okay? To get 10% off your first order, and let them know that we sent you. That's how you support them, and it's how you support us here at the Seth Gruber Show and the White Rose Resistance. Everylife.com, promo code Seth10. Thank you, Every Life Diaper.
The competition or the pressure to communicate, particularly to progressives, that we are sufficiently compassionate by caring about the things that they care about, by opposing the things that they oppose. This is one of the key dynamics that I'm focused on in this new book, is the way that the empathy for one group, the desire for credibility in their eyes has kind of basically put a little progressive on Christians' shoulders, and that they now feel like I live under the progressive gaze. They're evaluating everything I do. And so I will mute myself on things that they will find objectionable. And I will be loud and proud about things that they will celebrate. And it's a little imaginary progressive that begins to dictate your actions and the sorts of things that you care about, the way that you speak in public. And I think what happened in this instance was when he made that post, for a brief moment, he did not have that little progressive on his shoulder. Right? He made the post just because it was actually him going like, hey, there's actually some opportunity. He was thinking about, what does God think about this? What are the opportunities that God is giving us? He was under the divine gaze for a minute, but then very quickly that little progressive came back into his ear because of all the social media drama, and then the staff who were very, very upset by this, and that put that little guy back on top, and eventually he caved.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how is that really any different, brother, than, choose this day whom you shall serve? I mean, who are you trying to honor? Who are you trying to get applause and recognition from?
Right.
So, Dr. Rigney, I went to a very woke, very stupid Christian college called Westmont in Santa Barbara. Down the street from Oprah's house. I started the first pro-life club that had ever existed there. I held aborted, mutilated baby photos outside of the dining commons because I learned that there were pro-abortion faculty professors on the payroll, 4 or 5 of them. Some of them are still there. Dr. Gail Beebe, the president there, is a man without a chest. And I've been banned from campus. In fact, 3 different students have tried to bring me to speak on campus since I graduated, and the college has stepped in and shut it down. So Young America's Foundation.
Wait. Do you mean to say that a Christian college might not want to celebrate one of its faithful Christian alumni?
Yeah, not only have I not been invited to speak in chapel as the CEO of the fastest growing pro-life organization in America, but when a student wants to sponsor a Young America's no, they didn't approve the YAF Club. That's how bad Westmont is. A college Republican club wants to host a speaker and fundraise to bring him in. The college steps in and told this young man, Seth Gruber will never speak on campus. But the president of the college pushed the jab, and 2 or 3 Fauci face diapers shut down the campus and threatened to expel any student who left the campus in a certain time frame to go down to State Street to, God forbid, get some frozen yogurt because of the Wu flu. And so I say all this to tell you I only recommend 5 or 6 colleges to parents who come up to me at speaking engagements for their kids. New St. Andrews is one of them. But we had people who would leave Wheaton and they would do a year at Westmont. And, people called Wheaton, or people called Westmont Wheaton of the West. And they're kind of sister colleges and have a lot of friendships and crossover.
Did they mean did they mean that as a compliment? Like
of course they did.
The Wheaton of the West was meant to be praised. Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was supposed to be a compliment. Yeah, they're very high on their intellectual flatulence up there in Santa Barbara, Dr. Rigney. So, but it made me, it's made me very knowledgeable about the state of Christian education at 4-year Christian schools. And I particularly hate Wheaton because they decided to hire Dr. Ed Stetzer as their dean, who's now the dean of Talbot Theological Seminary and Sean McDowell's boss. over there at Biola, which is why, by the way, Sean is sort of an interesting fence straddler recently and doesn't take clear positions on things because Ed Stetzer is his boss. Anyways, I digress. So Wheaton has been bad for a while, but did you see this thing the other day? This fits perfectly in your book, The Sin of Empathy. Tell us the story about this Wheaton alum who's now in the Trump administration and Wheaton's reaction to all of this. Can you tell our viewers what happened?
Yeah, so a week ago today, at least a week ago when we were recording this, on a Friday, some intern or communications staffer at Wheaton College decided to congratulate their one of their alumni, Russ Vought, who had been confirmed by the Senate to be Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget. And so Russ Vought had served in that post back in the first Trump White House, and he was back in the same office and had been confirmed. And so, hey, congratulations, Wheaton alum, Russ Vought. We're praying for you. Very, again, a very innocuous, very simple thing.
Like Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, the sort of thing that presumably that their social media had done dozens and dozens of times for other alumni who had achieved prominent roles in business or government or what have you.
Yeah, I see my alma mater, Westmont, does that all the time on their Facebook.
Right. Right. And you can see why they would do that. Why would somebody post that? Well, because it's like, hey, come to our school and the places you'll go. You'll go to places like this. And so we want to celebrate that.
Which is not a bad thing, fundamentally.
No, that's we do that too. I mean, and St. Andrews loves to celebrate our alumni. But within 24 hours, they had pulled the post and apologized for it because they didn't want to be political. They said, we're a nonprofit institution. We're about Christ and his kingdom. And there's a political situation. And so while we normally would celebrate these things, in this case, because of the quote unquote political situation, we've decided not to. And you go, what political situation? And the answer is lots of online criticism from liberals who were upset that Wheaton would celebrate a member of the Trump administration. And so they'd pulled it. And you look at the situation and you can again see the different elements. And so in this case, I spent some time breaking this one down because I think it is instructive. And I have no inside information about the back rooms of Wheaton. I've been to Wheaton campus maybe one time. I spoke there on C.S. Lewis, actually. But I have no connections. One of my heroes and mentors went there, John Piper, is an Wheaton alum, and I've known other people. I've known professors. I've had friends who attended Wheaton back, 25 years ago, but I have no other connections. But it was obvious to me that what happened here was there's three groups that were in play. Group number one is what I call the victims. And I say victims because sometimes they really are people who have had hard things. Other times you could do scare quotes. You think of it as victim classes. There's certain people who operate as totems of empathy, where they're designed to awaken compassion in people. So in this case, that would be the illegal immigrants who are being deported by the Trump administration. It would be the quote unquote sexual minorities, as though that's a thing, who are literally being erased by the Trump administration because now that T on the end of the LGBT has been removed from the federal government. And so it's those sort of groups that are the victims that are threatened, they're scared, they're fearful because of the evil man in the White House and his posse, like guys like Russ Vought. So you have that group. Then you have a second group, the advocates, who basically take the empathy that you might feel for someone in that situation and weaponize it. And they appeal to it. They're hurt. They're upset. They're angry by this post. And they actually become a kind of a woke magisterium. And they're going to interpret and they're going to interpret for you what you really meant by that post. So yes, all you did, social media, was say congratulations to this man and you're praying for him. But what that actually meant was you're fully endorsing, without qualification, every action of every member of the Trump administration going back to his first term. That's what that really meant. And what you're saying is you're also saying that you hope that he's successful in deporting and cutting aid to foreign countries and school lunches for kids. And so kids are going to starve because Russ Vought is in the White House. And so these advocates begin to agitate on behalf of the quote unquote victims as a way of awakening empathy and steering the institution. So those are the two groups, and I think we're all kind of aware of these. It's sort of like you have victims, and you have we used to call them social justice warriors. That was that phenomenon. What I'm trying to draw attention to is that it's actually the third group that makes these sorts of things work, and it's the third group that I think is the biggest problem. And I call these the respectables. They're the respectable, nice guys. They're kind. They're soft-hearted. They want to be winsome. And they're the ones who have that little progressive on their shoulder, and they're the target of the steer. And what they'll do is because they want to be thought of as empathetic and they want to care about the things that the world tells them to care about, they will cater to the activists and accommodate them. And that's what Wheaton did. They catered to it. They pulled the post because they wanted to keep peace and not become political. And I just think, even as a matter of basic intelligence, like, how is that working out for you? You didn't want this to become political. If you didn't want it to become political, you should have just left it up. You should have ignored the noise and just left it up. And then it wouldn't have been political. It would have been you could have even said, we don't endorse candidates. We don't do any of that, but we want to celebrate our graduate and pray for them.
Right.
Simple state. If you want,
it would have kept it apolitical.
Exactly. Yeah. But instead, by pulling it, you guaranteed that it would be political, because it is political. You politicized your congratulations in order to, quote unquote, make peace. And in doing so, guaranteed that you're going to be in the news for a couple of weeks. And I, quite frankly, I'm thinking about sending a note of thanks to the Wheaton administration, because it did provide a great opportunity for me to say, hey, this is how it works, because Wheaton's not the only example. For the last 15 years, many Christian organizations have found themselves being steered by that combination of a victim class, advocates on their behalf, and respectable nice guys who leverage their credibility and their respectability in order to steer institutions to the left. And I think part of what the reason I'm animated by this is that many Christians lament what they call drift. They see Christian institutions, whether a college or a ministry or a church, they see that institution drift to the left, drift to the world. And part of what I'm trying to draw attention to is it's not actual drift. They're being steered. Drift implies they're just floating along, but there's actually someone with a hand on that steering wheel on their back, pulling them to the left, and they are cowardly acquiescing.
Wow. Isn't that wow? Yeah. So, Megan Basham's a good friend, and we've had her on the show several times. It was actually one of her more viral interviews. Praise God for her book. And I mean, that provides so much of the detail and proof to Dr. Rigney's statement, folks, exposing that there is an agenda. There are those attempting to steer institutions and churches. Really, what you're just describing, bro, is just weak men.
Yeah.
I mean, you can call them soy boys. That's my preferred term. But they might be nice guys. By the way, we don't need more Christian nice guys in 2025. Amen. We need bold, kind, righteous men. But they're nice, respectable guys, like you said. But when the heat gets turned up, man, they fold like a cheap suit.
Yeah. Well, and they perform an important function, because on paper they check all the right boxes. They can assign all the statements of faith. The Wheaton still has a very evangelical statement of faith, affirming inerrancy. They have a community covenant that actually says that Christ condemns all forms of sexual immorality outside of marriage, so pornography to sexual immorality, to fornication, to homosexuality. All of that's there on paper, and so they can point to that. And the nice guys are the ones who say, "Yeah, we believe this," but then they are steered by those who are trying to undermine and creatively get their way around it. And to your point about Megan Basham, she actually was a key influence in this book. So I'd been working on the empathy stuff for years and had a lot of material. But when her book was in process, and Megan and I are friends, and I can't remember if I listened to a talk that she gave or saw a pre-pub of the book, but it was a penny dropped for me. And it was the connection between this idea of empathy, which I thought a lot about, and the idea of credibility and respectability. And it was the two together. And so, like you said, her book is The Receipts. It shows all of the different ways that this happened in a kind of journalistic fashion over the last 10 or so years. Shepherds for Sale is her book. And then in mine, there's a chapter called Life Under the Progressive Gaze. And there's a fun pun there that sometimes people like to note, but because you don't want to be under the progressive gaze, Gaze, or the progressive gaze, Gays. There's God made a joke. But in that one, without doing the, it's not journalistic. I'm not describing particular situations like we are here. Instead, I'm describing dynamics. Here's the players involved. And I think what people will find is if they've been in situations like this over the last 15 years or so, they'll find the various characters very recognizable. They'll say, oh, I remember that pastor. I remember that person in our church. I remember that incident. And it will feel very helpful. And the goal is to shed light on how it worked so that, like you said, you can develop the kind of courage and sober-mindedness to resist it in the future. Because these dynamics aren't going away. They're perennial human problems. And until Christian leaders especially learn to resist those attempts to steer them, the church will continue to get steered and hijacked and derailed by worldly agendas.
Wow. Yeah. Yep. It's been a long time coming, honestly. I often think that some of this insanity started with the fundamentalist modernist split in the 30s, where I'm sorry if I offend you, you're a new friend, brother. But, John Piper, dude, that guy's just a lion, man. He's amazing. I've loved his stuff, but he's been renowned for backing down when it came to the manifestation of the spiritual fight in the political realm. In his essay in 2020, right before the 2020 election, I thought was very damaging. And it was basically, if I can summarize it, mean tweeting orange man, pride, sin of pride, Biden, baby killing. So sin of baby killing, sin of pride. They're both sins. Oh, and by the way, sin leads to death. And so, and his caption was, "This is the closest answer you'll get from me as to who I'm voting for." And you walked away reading it going, awesome. I have spiritual license to completely remove myself from the political affair because Jesus is neither left nor right. He's not a Republican or Democrat, and I can't vote for sin. So that that the fundamentalists at some point said, orthodoxy, purity of the gospel, hearts and minds, politics, ew. And then the modernists just became our modern day versions of Phil Vischer, T.D. Jakes, and Sojourners. So Jim Wallace. Dude, you know what we have to talk about before you go? Rick Warren's recent tweet, worst theological take in all of human history. Jesus is neither left nor right. He's calling you to a third way, and that way is empathy and love. Yes. Can you tell us about that, what he did there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, he puts a picture of Christ between the two thieves and says, he was between the one on the left and the one on the right, which is basically where Christians need to live. So,
that's right. Yes.
Which is a bizarre, and I'm sure it felt clever whenever he came up with it.
Yeah, well, he thinks he's very clever. Yeah.
But it does depend on this kind of false moral equivalence. And I think this is actually one of the things that happens under the progressive gaze, because we adopt this idea of maybe something like this. At certain times in American history, the idea of neither left nor right may have made sense. Whenever the nation as a whole had a kind of common moral foundation, and the political parties were basically debating the best way to govern accordingly, there could be good debates in there, and it would be about, wisdom calls type stuff. What kind of tax rate should we have or whatever? Yeah. All that's well and good. But when you've got to the point where one of the parties wants to castrate children, is openly celebrating the murder of unborn children, is at war with nature and nature's God, all of these sort of things, that's one side. And then the other side, like you said, has sexual immorality in it, as compromised in a number of different ways. What happens is the pressure that people feel internally to constantly balance the scales of left and right by maximizing the sins of the right and minimizing the sins of the left so that the scales balance so that you can stay in the middle in that third way. And so it's like be third way at all costs. And if that's the principle, one of the things the left has figured out is because Christians have that mentality, they can just keep pulling to the left hard.
Wow.
And Christians will go because we'll keep minimizing what they're doing and maximizing what the right is doing. Maximizing the sins of the right, Trump's mean tweets, that, like you said, in order to balance the scale so that we can stay out of it. Because if, on the other hand, if one of these is really, really high-handed wickedness and the other flawed, but still a reasonable vehicle for the pursuit of justice in society, one of the parties is a reasonable vehicle for the pursuit of justice in society. One of them is hostile to any pursuit of justice in society. If it's imbalanced, then Christians might have to choose sides and become partisan. Or the real thing is be accused of being partisan. You don't actually even have to be partisan. You could just say, hey, my vote's going to the folks that I think are going to do better than the other guys. That's it. It's simple. I'm not a partisan. I'm just going to vote for those guys. But you'll be accused of being MAGA. You'll be accused. And Christians flinch in the face of certain kinds of accusations. That's one of the main steering wheels that people use against us is we want to have reputations. We want to have certain kind of reputations and not be thought of as misogynistic or an abuse enabler or whatever labels you want to throw on people. Yeah. Christians will jump through a lot of hoops to make sure that doesn't happen. And so I think that is a major failing, and the world's figured out how to game us on that. And it's something we have to overcome.
Yep. Last question for you. The recent He Gets Us campaign at the Super Bowl. By the way, just to bring up, you know how you said some of the same players on some of the stuff? Guess who's an advisor to crafting the He Gets Us ads? Ed Stetzer.
Stetzer, yeah.
He said that to Sean McDowell on the Thinking Biblically Biola podcast a while back. He said, I helped advise and craft the not this year's, but the last year's, and probably this year too. I feel like that is the sin of empathy. And I also feel like it's cowardice, capitulation, wokeism, and an alternative gospel. But what did we see at the Super Bowl recently?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because this was true not just of the He Gets Us ad, but a lot of the ads, where you can detect an awareness of the backlash in the culture. So the He Gets Us ad a year ago was horrific and received all kinds of comment because of its because of how DEI and woke it was. And so all that backlash that they received, I think that they were chastened a little bit. And so this year's version, Jesus shows us what true greatness is. There were a number of the images that I thought, that's fine. But all of it is designed to be somewhat left-coded. It's meant to communicate and cater to the sensibilities and sensitivities of the left. Like what you're not going to see in a He Gets Us ad is a person in a red MAGA hat in any kind of position of praiseworthiness. You just won't see it because there
was a gender bending person,
of course,
at a pride rally being hugged and embraced by a priest.
Yeah, again, a guy with a pastor with John 3:16 hat. And you sit there and you go, I have a bucket in my head for that sort of thing. Like I can imagine, maybe he's repenting of his sins. Or maybe the pastor's giving him a back rub in his sins. Like that, like either one, and you don't know. Like the whole point is just affirm, just validate. But I think you saw this in a lot of these ads, even the other secular ads that were trying to be a little more, Bud Light, it's a great example. They finally figured out that the whole going in on the transgender stuff with Dylan Mulvaney was a bad call, and they've lost so much money over this. And so they're like, let's get Post Malone and Shane Gillis and Peyton Manning and let's just grill outside with beer and see if we can recover. So you see this kind of like attempt to kind of move back and moderate. The thing that I found really fascinating about all the Super Bowl ads on this subject was how many, basically, the reaction against DEI and the extremities of wokeness in the transgender stuff. They didn't push that envelope in the same way that they have in years past. Instead, they doubled down on feminism. And so many of the ads were designed to kind of I think they were a kind of retreat and a retrenchment around feminism. So there was an ad in which a girl beats a dude. She's at flag football, and she basically makes this guy, an entire flag football team of white guys. It's an African-American woman, makes them look silly, just juking them out and all this kind of stuff. And so there was a bunch of girl bossy feminist stuff. And I think that's going to be the play in the coming years is they'll mute themselves on some of the extremes, and they'll retrench on feminism, because that's a place where both parties are still fairly captured. Even the Republicans aren't at war with feminism. And back to the subject of my book, feminism is the queen of the woke, like the enabler of all things woke, because women are the more empathetic sex. Women, by God's design, this is a good thing. It's not a problem. It's a glorious thing in its place. But it's part of what gets hijacked when women are, say, in positions of church leadership, or when pastors cater to them and try to bring them into church leadership. I saw another clip, if we're talking about recent examples, the president of Lifeway has this little video that was circulating on social media yesterday, in which he was trying to describe how certain churches are effectively trying to evade the Southern Baptist Convention's male-only pastorate by you got to get creative, and you got to form advisory councils made up of men and women that are going to set the trajectory and dream about the vision of the church. So it's a way of like circumventing male-only pastorate. By bringing women into the room where it happens, make sure that they're in the decision-making room, as a way of circumventing it. And it's like, to the degree that you do that, you are setting yourself up for empathetic steering, because that's what will happen in those rooms. What will happen in those rooms is what happened to Wheaton. It's what happened to Andy Wood. It's what happened in all of these situations. You will get more and more of it, because God designed men to be the leaders of his church. And therefore it's normal that men would be the leaders in society. Men are built for this, and women are built for something else. They're life givers. They're nurturers. They're meant to be places of care and compassion and warmth in communities. It's a glorious thing in its place. But when you move it to the perimeter setting roles, right? Whether it's military, whether it's the church, when you put empathy there, you're asking to have compromise. You're asking for error to be brought into the church under the guise of care and compassion.
Yeah. I mean, there are always exceptions. You know, I think of someone like, the Hawaiian girl that just got a Tulsi Gabbard. You know, there are exceptions, but by and large, you're right. Women are going to be far more driven by empathy than you or I would be in a position of leadership. And that has ramifications. That has consequences.
Well, and the other element of it is that men in those situations, battles are ugly when women fight. And so if a woman is making a case for something false, men have a harder time resisting it, especially good men, because you don't hit girls. And so if a guy is making an argument for something that you disagree with, you'll push back hard on him, because that's how men learn to respect each other, is through challenge and wrestling over issues. But you don't do that with girls. Same reason you don't physically punch them or physically wrestle with them. You don't want to do that in this kind of intellectual or theological combat. So because of that, if they're in the room, men orient because they're showing honor to women as the weaker vessel. Well, some women figure out that if you present as the weaker vessel, you can get your way, right? You can steer the ship by being a wolf in sheep clothing, a she-wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah. Well, that's why Rush called it the feminazis. So... Dr. Rigney, fascinating, man, conversation. I'm sure we could talk for hours. Your book, The Sin of Empathy, where can people get it and learn more about you and your ministry as Voice? Yeah,
so I'm on the only social media I have is on Twitter, or X, Joe_Rigney. You can get the book at canonpress.com. It's available there. I think that they're actually starting to ship now, so if you get in there now, you can get it. And then if you read it and you're completely depressed because you see all of it everywhere and you want to figure out, well, what do I do about it? leadership and emotional sabotage would be the antidote to what ails you.
Okay. Excellent. Well, Dr. Rigney, thank you. We'll have to have you back on. Don't be a steer. That's what Dr. Rigney says. Don't be a steer. Fun video. You also tweeted out on that. Guys, go check them out. Pick up the book. Super, super valuable. Don't send your kids to Wheaton or Westmont, or for that matter, Biola now, actually. But consider New St. Andrews, and your kid might get to hang out with this guy right here.
That's
Dr.
right. I teach, that is the thing. So I teach freshman theology here at New St. Andrews. We have a big time working through, Old Testament and New Testament and theology and practical stuff and all kinds of things. So we have a big time doing that here at New St. Andrews. And so if you've got a high school student, we'd love to have them check us out.
There you go. Go visit Moscow, Idaho, folks. Thanks, brother. We'll see you again. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Super fun, huh? Great guy, smart guy, a warrior. He's one of us. And if we can't retake education and the discipleship of our children to be dragon slayers, guys, then you're not going to win the culture war in the long run. And that's why what Dr. Rigney and the brothers at New St. Andrews College are doing is so important. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give the show rating and review. We really appreciate it. Check out Canon Plus, by the way. Great stuff on there. Super fun. My wife and I are subscribers. Go to the 1916project.com and pre-order the DVD. That's right. You can pre-order the film, The 1916 Project, in DVD form with Dr. George Grant, Dr. Nancy Piercy, Eric Metaxas, Jana Manchukwu, Bishop Wooden, Bill Federer. It's incredible. And go to thewhiterose.life if you want to join us in rebuilding Christian resistance against the culture of death before it's too late. Until next time, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.